Hi, everyone. I'm Deanne Barrett, and I'm thrilled to introduce you today to Rebeca Kirstein, founder of Rethink Thinking and also mom to a teenage girl. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I know that we kind of have connected over teenagers, the incredible possibilities that they have, the incredible enthusiasm they have, and really ways to maximize those qualities. So tell us a little bit about your work at Rethink Thinking.
Yeah, well, it's based entirely on that, entirely on the fact that I think societally we don't really recognize the true purpose of adolescence, and that looking back historically, adolescence is a very very necessary evolution, and that the actual evolutionary purpose of adolescence is to go outside the box and set sail for new shores and seek new ways of doing things from previous generations. And so our entire organization is founded to really honor that and give youth the opportunity to explore what matters to them and to quote unquote set sails for new shores. So and that's really what our events do, certainly what the inquiry model does, and it gives young people an opportunity to explore what they really care about and make things happen in the world and make change happen that's important to them. And I think that's really really important. And I think we've really lost sight of that in society. It's like this, we refer to teenage years as this kind of rebellious time, and we got to kind of just like keep them safe and while they make it through that time, and it's the time that more than ever they need to be able to explore and really figure out what lights them up from within.
I couldn't agree more. And as, a high school teacher for so long, one of the things I loved about working with teenagers is their ability to put things together in fresh ways. And I think we need that, but also it threatens the systems that we're in because we have to then either like shut that down or crack that open. And maybe there are some other things in between those two models in terms of response, but so often we go to the shut this thing down kind of model, which is why Rethink Thinking is so refreshing. Tell us logistically what that's all about for people who haven't heard of Rethink Thinking.
Yeah. So logistically, so what we started our organization with was an event called the Summit, and that was sort of the flagship way of sort of putting that model out there and testing it with young people beyond a school model. So one of our original founders of Rethink Thinking is Jeff Hopkins, who runs the Pacific School of Innovation and Inquiry and is the founder of that school. And so I did some work as a mentor with students at that school, and ultimately discovered what an incredible methodology, educational methodology, was being used by Jeff at the school. Ultimately enrolled my own daughter at the school, and I have now seen that as a parent as well. And the intention behind the summit was to give kids, regardless of where they went to school, whether they were homeschooled, private school, public school, anywhere in between, that they could have the opportunity to explore that kind of learning. What matters to me? What do I care about? How do I find other people that care about what I care about? And how do we come together to collaborate to solve real world challenges, and the kind of learning that comes from that? And so that's really what the summit events are all about, is giving them an opportunity to do that, to find others like them that care about what they care about, and come together in this really fun, interactive event with lots of community partners and lots of. The only way you get involved as an adult is being there as a facilitator, a volunteer, or as a member of our human library, who are there to really just guide them if they get stuck. But that ultimately the entire event and the projects that come out of it are entirely determined by the youth who attend.
I just want to stop and acknowledge the beauty of this model, because sometimes we feel like, okay, but if we get all these teenagers together, like they're just going to run rampant and run amok. But when you have that model of like that incredible enthusiasm and ability to build on each other's ideas and work cooperatively with the experience and mentorship of, your human library of people with some experiences where they've been through it, that is really golden.
Absolutely. It's an amazing, it really is amazing to watch. So being a part of it on the inside, which very few adults get to do, is really exciting. It's yeah, they don't run amok. It's like when you give teenagers that much freedom, I think that there is sort of an expectation that things will be a little bit chaotic. And I've never seen so much focus in my life from young people when you give them the free rein to explore what they care about and the tools to do it. They were focused and they work hard for 2 days making this real in the world because they really care about it.
Now, let's go back to an example that you shared with me, and it's about you mentoring another student at the school. And that's such a brilliant example because often, parents will come to me and say, my kid's not motivated. And, or my kid is anxious. And so we have all of these kind of labels around, like they're just sitting back and not really engaged with life. And I often say, we need to help them connect in a way where they know they can engage and it means something to them, rather so they're driven towards overcoming, well, I'm a shy person, but I can overcome it because I have this much more compelling reason why I want to do it. Tell us about your experience mentoring a very shy young woman.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really the basis of how this all sort of came to be, was working with a young woman by the name of Brianna, who is incredibly smart and capable and driven, and wanted to explore the idea of learning about retail, learning about opening a retail store. And she was really passionate about that idea and about Christmas. She's a total Christmas junkie, listens to Christmas tunes all year round and admits it too. And so I worked with this young student who was 16 at the time. And really, I didn't do much at all other than consult with her and, kind of help her when she got stuck and guide her to sort of other adult mentors that could help her through certain parts of the process. And really was just there as a mentor. And in the span of working with her for less than 3 months, she opened a pop-up shop over the Christmas holidays. For I think less than 3 weeks they were open, and she grossed $10,000 in that time and donated that to the Single Parent Resource Center, because that was a cause that was close to her heart. And more importantly than all the skills she gained in learning about retail and learning what it's like to run a small business and working on consignment deals with local vendors and brokering a deal with the landlord to secure the space and all those kinds of things that she learned about. More importantly, she developed an incredible amount of confidence in herself and really changed as a human being before my eyes in a very short period of time. She went from being a very anxious young girl who had a difficult time looking me in the eye to being just a whole other level of confidence, to the point where within that same year, she was, even months later, she was local stages at the social media conference here locally in Victoria, which is like, hundreds and hundreds of people. She is now featured in Chris Guillebeau's next book, which is called Side Hustle. And he's for those of you who don't know, he's a very world-renowned entrepreneur. And his most recent book features a story about Brianna and her experience with entrepreneurship. And ultimately, she credits entrepreneurship with being her antidote to anxiety. And that the experiences she had in learning about herself in that way changed her and gave her some tools to be able to access, when she's feeling anxious or as though she can't do something she needs to do, she's able to draw on some of the skills and the tools that she developed personally through going through that process. And so what I saw from that experience was that, whether it's entrepreneurship or not, that's just a vehicle. All kids have that capacity to explore something that really matters to them and ultimately not only gain skills, very specific skills like how to open a retail store, but real personal skills. What do I care about? What makes me get up in the morning? What can I get excited about? And ultimately, how do these things make me feel? And how do I, collaborate with others and navigate through the world? And, what am I passionate about? All those kinds of things are in traditional learning environments not the focus. It's content and not competency. And so this really focused on developing competencies for her. And what that did for her as an individual was actually almost shocking to witness. and that ultimately as adults, whether we're teachers or parents, that is our job in adolescence, is to witness and allow them to become who they're meant to be. And I think we do far less of that than we should in our society. So it was a pretty phenomenal experience for me.
Such a powerful an example. And I can just feel when you ask adolescents, anyone really, but especially adolescents, what do you really think and what's important to you? Some of them will say, no one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah. And the common answer is, I don't know, because it's not a question they get asked. And certainly I hear that often, particularly from kids who are in a traditional school model. Unless they've had, the right teacher at the right time, those are often questions they aren't asked, and certainly aren't asked over and over again and in depth. And that is what I love about this model, is that it isn't just about, asking that question, hey, what matters to you? It's like, hey, what matters to you? And what are you going to do about it? What's next? And the inquiry that creates, some of these inquiries are years and years long, and others might be a week or two, or, and the level of depth that they go to in any one, sort of subject area, for lack of a better description, the interdisciplinary approach of that, it's like you might explore whatever it may be. You might explore opening a store, but the interdisciplinary nature of doing that kind of work, whether it's business or math or social skills, and everything else that sort of integrates into that kind of learning, is just it's really, really powerful learning that you can't forget. And that's so much different than memorizing content and standardized testing and those kinds of things. The kind of learning that happens when young people are engaged like that it's barely even measurable. It's so fantastic to watch. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and then they're learning actually so much more about themselves, which is when we're outside of the traditional schooling system. No one's going to, we're not going to say like, oh, well, I'm a B student, like I'm a B person out in the world, like I'm a B parent. So I know that's who I am. So I'm just okay being a B parent. Like we get so much in this mindset of just thinking, well, I'm kind of reaching the level that I believe that I am, and it informs who we think we are, when we can step outside of that and recognize a couple of things. I'm part of something much bigger, and I have a piece of the puzzle, and other people have a piece of the puzzle, and I have something to give and I can receive. That just is life-changing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And recognizing that you don't have to be good at everything, and the idea that it's like, oh, well, I'm failing math, or I'm bad at math. I mean, my own daughter had an experience of that, where she really, for most of her young life in school, believed that she was bad at math, and that was just not possible for her brain to work in that way, until she started exploring, other things, whether it's baking or knitting or music or, all these other things that relate to math, and realizing, oh yeah, my brain actually does work that way. It just processes that differently. And that I actually am really quite capable of, her musical skill and her, ability to read a knitting pattern and those kinds of things are off the charts. So it's like, you start to recognize that, oh, the way that I was being taught math didn't make sense to me, but math totally makes sense to me. I get it. And so when it's practical and it applies to your real life, you see it so differently, and also then become invested in it. She was always a musician, but was never interested in music theory until she understood that her brain could actually work that way. So it's fascinating to see, how many kids go through that experience of like, oh, I've always got D's in this or C's in this, so therefore I'm not good at that. It's like, well, you may not be good at it in the way that it was positioned for you, and in being tested on, your sort of knowledge of that area, but that is not all there is, and that ultimately real learning happens in real life. So it's and particularly for teenagers, that's a pretty unbelievable awakening to come to if you've been in a traditional school model your whole life and haven't really experienced that. And I mean, even in the traditional model, my daughter herself had some really incredible teachers. And I think, and that's something I always like to make clear, that when we talk about the traditional model not working, it has absolutely nothing to do with teachers and everything to do with the system itself and how it's structured. And the interruption, it's like in 40-minute blocks or 50-minute blocks, you're learning X. And it's at this time and this place, whether you're ready for that or not, or whether you're interested in it or not, just isn't conducive to how humans learn. And we've known that for a long time. And, teachers know that, and teachers sort of battle within that to try and make that work in the system that they're in. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge to have real learning happen in that kind of format. And so I'm having conversations with teachers all the time about how to create this within the system. And there's only so much of that you can do within that system when you have to, adhere to timetables and testing and all those kinds of things. So it's time to get rid of all that. It's time to let kids explore the world in meaningful ways.
I'm with you. And, I would echo that same thing as a high school teacher for over a decade in this traditional school model. And I also have studied the inquiry model. There's a lot of baggage around the inquiry model because teachers will say, it's just another fad. It's another thing. It's another thing we have to do. And the reason why all of that language comes up is because of what you just described. Like, okay, but it doesn't actually work with like a 45-minute time block. That's not what we're about here. It's something much bigger.
Yeah.
But having educators see examples of how that could work and having enough support to really make the change. It'll be interesting to see how this will turn the tide of education, because I think it's time. When we look at adolescent development and the psychology behind it, this is an incredible time of figuring out who they are and trying on different things, and an incredible time of the brain wiring itself and the spirit yearning for a place to fit. And I have seen so many students just feel a sense of desperation around that because of the situation that they're in. And I just know, it could be so different for them if they just could see that they had a purpose bigger than, the suffering they felt in their own life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's everything, right? I mean, I think that is what so many, adults struggle with is, why, a lot of us wake up kind of in our, whether it's our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and have that experience of like, oh, I've been doing these things that I don't really care about my whole life. It's like, I'm not actually interested in the field of work that I'm in. I don't like my job. I've ended up in a relationship that doesn't work for me or serve me as a human. And, we all have, those, and we watch our friends go through that too, right? Where it's like, oh, there's another friend who kind of woke up one day and went, what the hell am I doing? And like moved to Bali and like, did something totally different. Right. And it's like, we start to see more and more of that happening. And I think we can really alleviate that kind of stress for our young people when we give them the opportunity to really uncover like what better time when your parents are paying the bills and you're living at home to explore all these things and fall on your face and realize, oh, I don't like that. And maybe I like this more. And, and really explore those things when ultimately the stakes aren't so high. And then you're way less likely to end up being that, 45-year-old with 2 kids and a mortgage who feels trapped by the life that you've created because you can't quit your job. You can't go out and start something new because of all of these constraints. So, we all see that happening all the time around us. Right. And it's amazing when people wake up in that way and realize that their life isn't working and change it. But how many people wake up and realize their life isn't working and are afraid to because they or don't have the tools or resources or finances or whatever it may be that stops them from living a life that is authentic to who they are. So I really want to see that eliminated for young people, because I think when we start exploring that from a very young age, by the time you graduate high school, it's not to say you're not going to change your mind or go through many different careers, but you're going to have really explored the things that excite you and fire you up and that you're passionate about. And what I see happening in this model is that kids are really uncovering some real core passions and desires at like a really young age. And, people say, well, not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, not everyone's going to, and it's not about that. It's not about entrepreneurship. These kids they're scientists and they're doctors and they're, tradespeople, and they're everything in between. It doesn't actually change. The world is still served by all the people with all the different skills, and, the incredibly empathic people that make amazing doctors and nurses. And, we all have different skills and strengths. And the reality is that, all of those sort of, really important jobs in the world will be filled because there is an incredible variety of different types of people in the world. And our young people just need to find out who it is that they are in order to explore those paths.
And I can't think of anything better than people being in whatever role they're in terms of a career, that actually are enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. No, if like, I am grateful that there are construction workers here in my city building new roads. Yeah. I don't want to be out in the freezing cold building roads, but I am grateful that they're doing that job, and someone needs to continue to do those jobs. And, blessings upon them, because I am grateful that they do that work. And I hope that they are happy about it and go home, and feel content with the life that they're in. Because I can't think of anything better for, my own kids, my students. Find something that you feel like you're making a difference, like you feel like it's a good fit for you. And I think you touched on an important part, and it's that being able to recalculate and not feeling like you're locked in with fear to whatever it is. Because if you have learned how to do that in one situation, I can recalculate again. I know what I have inside of me, so that when I get to a point where, like, I have loved this, but now things have shifted and it's not really the right place for me, I know how to shift into something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality of the future is that, our kids will not have the life that we've had or that our parents have had. Many of the jobs that exist today will not exist. Many, many, many jobs that we've never even heard of and can't fathom will exist. And so the skills that they need to really navigate life in the future that is quite unknown. And we can all pretend we have some idea of what's coming, but we really don't. And what we know is coming is change, and lots of it, and faster and faster. And so our kids need to be resilient, and they need to be creative and innovative. And, it's those real, like, problem solving skills that matter. And, rote memorization and, all of those things are not skills of the future. So let's really focus on the things that they need, and being adaptable, and understanding themselves and what their place in the world is.
Now, I know that many teachers and parents too get into this place of fear, because they think, well, but what if they're going to be missing a whole skill set? What if they're going to be, realize, oh, I need that and I don't have that? How do you respond to that fear?
I respond to that I really, it's a very individual thing. And as a parent, my fear of my child operating in a system that we know no longer serves, the kids of the future, and that, memorizing and standardized testing. And, I literally forgot everything I learned in high school, like the minute I left. And it was like, because it was all so content based, and it is changing, but it's not changing fast enough. And that ultimately, my fear as a parent would be greater, that I just, went, the school's job is XYZ, and I'm just going to send my kid there and hope for the best, even though I know that the system isn't catching up fast enough. And the skills that my child is developing are probably, not all the skills that they need. For me, the fear of that is far greater than the fear of trying a new model that we can see success in already, though we don't have 20, 30 years of data, but all the data from the last, 60 to 100 years on human development and education, and really what it takes to sort of educate humans in the current society. All of our data tells us that we're doing it wrong. Like we know this to be true. And it's the reason, ministries of education and people globally are having these conversations and trying to move these models ahead and trying to incorporate inquiry and talking about, sort of retraining. And, it's why John Abbott and Sir Ken Robinson and, Tony Wagner and all these, professionals out there who study this stuff day in, day out are going like, hey, whoa, stop everybody. Like the data's in, it's been in for a long time. We know that this isn't working. Here's some proposed suggestions for the future. And ultimately, I think many people are paralyzed by the fear of, well, what if we make the wrong choice? Or what if we teach the wrong things or incorporate the wrong things into the model? But ultimately, what we know is we know how humans learn. Like we know that humans learn by doing. We know how babies learn to walk and talk and, get up and crawl and, and nobody teaches them. You leave a baby alone and don't give them any instruction on how to do those things and they learn. So we as humans learn by doing, and we are naturally curious, and we need to allow space for that curiosity throughout our lives in order to learn effectively, but also to become who we are, because we are all so different.
I've started calling inquiry the natural learning process. And
Excellent.
I did that because inquiry was really teacher talk. And now I work mostly with parents. And so, to talk about inquiry, they're like, I don't know what that is, Deanne. But I talk about the natural learning process because that's really how it operates. I mean, you just beautifully described babies learning to walk. And I'll say, okay, if you're like, I'm hungry, I want to make mac and cheese. How do I make mac and cheese? It starts with a question. How do I do this? And then, okay, so I might go to the box and read it, but I was like, I don't want just that kind of mac and cheese. I want like really good mac and cheese.
Yeah.
How did they do it at my favorite restaurant? Okay, so maybe I'm going to see if there's a recipe online. Maybe I'm going to look it up. Maybe I'm going to call them. Maybe I'm going to talk to my mom. Maybe I'm going to call my friend. So I'm automatically connecting with other people and doing some research.
Yep.
Absolutely. How do I do this? Then I'm going to try it. I'm going to be like, this doesn't taste like it used to. Now I'm evaluating. And then I'm moving on to like reframing. Okay, maybe I need more cheddar cheese in this mac and cheese. Okay, now I'm evaluating again after I've done, this cycle. And then at the end, it's going to lead me to another question. How can I make this recipe even better? Yeah. And then I'm going to experiment again. Maybe I'll add bacon. And we've just done the whole loop of the inquiry model, in teacher talk. But this is natural learning. This is how we operate. It starts with a question that actually pulls us forward and is compelling to us. And I think the more we can trust that is what happens, then we're in that sweet spot. And I feel like in lots of ways, we get all really fearful about learning because we have a really structured, narrow view of what learning looks like.
Yes, we do. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I love that example. I always use the example, like in the adult space, talking to parents is like, do you remember when you bought your first car? Like, do you remember how it was like, I don't know how to buy a car. Like, how many people did you talk to about their cars or, what mattered to them and what kind of car they bought and why? And like, I still, to this day, I have an electric car. So I'm one of the like early adopters of the electric car. It's shocking to me how many messages I get from people who are like, hey, I hear you bought an electric car. Like, tell me about it. Right. And what do you like and what do you don't like and all those kinds of things. And that is absolutely how we learn. And certainly our children, in the world that they live in, where like, they just post on any social media site, hey, who knows about this, or who can help me with this, or, and they bring together their resources, and that we don't actually necessarily translate that to like, that is real, whether you're just looking for, somebody who's got a bike they can lend you on the weekend, or you're looking for real deeper answers to deeper questions. We have such exposure to so many different groups of people that we can poll our friends, we can ask for, experts in certain areas, and we can find all of this on the internet in many cases. And in even better, we can find a lot of those people and resources in our community where we can actually sit down with a real life human and talk to them about what it is that they do and what they know, which is, again, the whole purpose behind the human library. And certainly the mentorship component of this type of learning is that there's things you can't learn from the Google. My daughter always mocks me when I say the Google because I said it on purpose. But yeah, there's so much that can be learned from sitting down. The conversation we're having now. We can learn from each other and share ideas and swap ideas, and it's fascinating that we've so lost sight of that as a real learning tool.
Yeah, and I think this is really great our technology has this incredible capacity to connect us. And in some ways, it also has the incredible capacity to make us feel isolated because so much is, superficial exchanges. But when we can really tap into connecting with people in a genuine way and making those connections, it is incredible. I mean, the way you and I met was from someone else. I was connecting with someone else, and he's like, "You need to meet Rebecca because you have so much in common." And voila, here we are. It's just this incredible awareness of, how can I serve people and who could be connected in order to bring something new to the world. And I think that is so exciting for our times right now.
Yeah, we're really excited because it's like it's just, there's so many people who are starting to understand this now. So it's parents, it's teachers, it's, people coming forward and saying, how do we create more of this in the world? And how do we get more young people involved in this kind of learning? Because it's just so impactful and we see it working, and it's like, so that's my answer to, what the fears of, it's like, I see it working, and I see it with my own child, and I'm willing for my own child to quote unquote be a guinea pig. We like to call them pioneers. And being a pioneer of this system is really exciting because, ultimately what I'm seeing is an incredible amount of learning, a love of learning, and even more importantly, joy. Like spring break is a bummer in my house. Like my kids, like, when is school starting? And her and her friends are, they're right now, she's gone off to work on a podcast that they're working on. And, they're still working on their school projects. Because they're not school projects, they're life projects. They're things they care about and that they want to see real in the world. So, school doesn't stop, and it doesn't happen in the four walls, and it happens in the community and in the world, and it never ends for them. They're doing it at night and they're doing it on the weekends because they're engaged. And that's what real learning looks like. So if your kid is like dying for school to end and spring break to come and not the reverse, then we've got a problem, right? That doesn't work. That real learning happens when people are engaged and excited. And if our kids are dreading going to school, then something is not working. And so I watch these kids and they're like pumped to go to school. And that says everything to me.
Yeah, it becomes a get to, doesn't it? I get to go to school and I get to learn from this person, and I get to, walk through that thing that I'm blocked on right now because I know that's what the purpose of going there will do for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they're feeling when they're on spring break. They're like, oh, she's calling teachers. It was like Sunday yesterday, and she's talking to one of her teachers on the phone. And, because they're so engaged, and these are their tools and their resources. And so they don't just detach. It doesn't just end because it's spring break. So, it takes real dedication from those teachers, but they love it too, because they're all engaged. So it's fascinating to watch. It's an incredible model, and I can't say enough positive things about it. And is it perfect? And is it still, it's never going to be perfect. And that's the point, is that it's going to constantly evolve as the world evolves around us. And, is there work being done on the model constantly? Absolutely. Because we're constantly getting feedback, and Jeff, who is the creator of the model, Jeff Hopkins, he's constantly taking in feedback from parents, from teachers, from students, and refining and developing this model, because it is exactly that. It's an ever-changing thing. And I don't think he'll ever be like, yep, that's the model, it's done, that's all there is to it, because the world's going to keep changing, and our education model needs to keep changing with it.
And it's a great question. It's an inquiry in itself, isn't it? How do we best engage adolescents in learning that will serve them for their life?
Yeah. And I think that Sir Ken Robinson said it best when he came to he was our keynote at the inaugural summit. And he said, the problem lies when we start trying to educate kids. And that's just it, right? Is that natural learning will happen if we create the environment in which for it to happen. So it's the when we start trying to educate you and fill your head with content or knowledge that we believe you need, that it all goes sideways. And the kids get disengaged, and when they're disengaged, they're not learning. So it's it's as simple as that. If they don't want to be there and they're not feeling it, it's like you're only going to get so far.
Yeah. So what's next for Rethink Thinking?
What's next for Rethink Thinking is tomorrow we have a panel. We're hosting a panel event, so it'll be Jeff Hopkins and Lisa Tate and Allison Reese and who am I missing? I'm missing someone very important. Jillian Roberts. So psychologists to educators, and people in the mental health space as well, and hosting a panel to launch a big announcement of our crowdfund campaign, which will be launching tomorrow night, to raise $220,000 to launch the next inquiry school right here in Victoria, which is a middle school opening in September. Using the same model as the Pacific School of Innovation Inquiry, which was developed by Jeff Hopkins. So he will be consulting on the development of that throughout moving this model into the middle school format, and working with a bunch of really awesome educators and seeking more educators to get involved as well, and more parents. So the website will launch tomorrow for the crowdfund campaign. So our website is www.rethinkthinking.ca, and the crowdfund platform will be rethinkschool.ca, and we'll be raising money, and people can do that by paying tuition as well to sign up for school in the fall. And we have parent information sessions coming, and we'll be live streaming the event as well. So tomorrow's panel, if you're not in Victoria, BC, you can still watch by live stream. So I'll give you the links.
Oh, super. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Really, yeah. Thanks for having me and chatting about this. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day, as you well know.
Yes. I know. Rebecca, thank you so much, because I know that this work, as you described, this pioneering work, is so profoundly hopeful for adolescents and the parents who love them in terms of creating a shift. And for those of you who are thinking, like, I'm not in Victoria, BC, like my kid's in grade 12, what do I do? I can't say enough about finding mentors for your teens, whatever their passion is. If you can connect them with someone in your community that can help them take that interest, that passion, that project one step further, that will just help them see where they can fit in their community in a bigger way, and bridge them into that adult world of being passionate, asking great questions, figuring out the answers with the people and the resources around them.
I could not agree more. And I thank you for saying that, because I think regardless of anything else, if you don't have access to, this kind of education or these kind of events, mentorship is so powerful, and you don't know who's in your network until you ask. So sometimes we think, oh, I don't know anybody that I could connect my kid to, and I don't have people like that in my network. People don't know what you're looking for unless you ask, and you'd be surprised at how many people are out there that really want to impact the lives of young people. So put it out there and ask, because it's so important for our kids.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca, thank you so much. We'll be thinking of you tomorrow as you launch all of your the next chapter of this pioneering work.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you to everyone watching for spending your time with us today. You can see the links below. We'll link that right up, so you can link with Rethink Thinking and check that out. Okay, everyone, until next time, be well.